Throughout the 1960s, there was a growing concern surrounding the theft of pets. This concern surrounded animal research labs. Animal dealers were stealing pets from their homes, like dogs and cats, and selling them to animal research labs for experimentation. In 1965, Life magazine published an article entitled "Concentration Camps for Dogs." This article focused on the acts of animal dealers stealing and selling pets to animal research labs. I want to premise of what I'm about to speak, for it surrounds the inhumane treatment of animals. Please feel free to mute your video or step out of the room if it makes you feel uncomfortable. The article speaks of pets stolen by dealers. They speak of stories where they had rescued animals and where others had perished. An English pointer, Lucky, was taken from her home and sold to a research lab. She was later rescued, but her rescue was described as a pathetic, emaciated horror. Pepper the Dalmatian sadly perished during a horrific experiment. Activists rallied and their voices were heard by the lawmakers. Animal research was not going anywhere, but regulations would have to be put in place. The Animal Welfare Act was put into place in 1966. Congress directed the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture to regulate a program to license animal dealers in dogs and cats. They also put in place that animal research facilities would require registration. Humane care was mentioned in the act, as well as inspections, but the exact quality of care was not specified. The act would cover live dogs, cats, non-human primates, or monkeys, guinea pigs, hamsters, and rabbits. The first flaw in the Animal Welfare Act was that when it was put into place to set standards of how animals were obtained and maintained in a facility, it did not, however, regulate how the animals were used in research. Congress mainly wished to address the growing problem of stolen pets. The Act states that registered research facilities were required to purchase dogs and cats from licensed dealers and keep a record of this. There were numerous amendments to the Welfare Act since the 60s. It was amended in 1970, 1976, 1985, 1990, 2000, and 2008. To summarize the current act, the following will be quoted from the National Anti-Vivisection Society page, or NAVIS. Vivisection is defined as the cutting of or operation on a living animal, usually for pathological or physiological investigation, or animal experimentation that is considered to cause distress to the subject. NAVIS is dedicated to increase public awareness about animal experimentation and promote solutions to advance humane science. They support research and the development of alternatives to animal testing. The following is an overview of the current Animal Welfare Act. Permits are required to buy and sell listed animals. They must register for their use as dealers of animals, exhibitors of animals in research facilities. Pet owners, agricultural use, and retail pet stores are exempt from the provisions of this federal law. There are limitations and regulations on how animals may enter a controlled chain of commerce and to eliminate the use of stolen animals. So there are limitations and regulations on what paperwork is done, how the animal is transferred, and how they are taken to the facility. There are limitations and regulations on the environmental conditions under which the animals must be kept. Research facilities may purchase listed animals only from licensed dealers. Those who transport must comply with published regulations governing the well-being of animals. Research facilities must create an animal care committee to review the use of animals by the facility and inspect animal housing facilities. Research facilities must abide by legal restrictions on the imposition of pain during research. Research facilities must comply with extensive regulations concerning the housing and care of animals in research. It is illegal for any person to knowingly sponsor or exhibit an animal in any fighting venture. Animals covered under the Welfare Act are all warm-blooded. Animals excluded from this are mice, rats, birds, and fish. Mice, rats, and birds account for nearly 90% of the subjects used in laboratories, and the United States is one of the only countries that does not include fish in their welfare policy. Animal testing is supported by many, and it does have a place in science in the advancement of medicine. William T. Tallman, MD, professor of neurology and neuroscience at the University of Iowa, states, "Do not think that the only value coming from studies utilizing animals is development of cures or testing of potential cures. In fact, studying living creatures gives the scientist an opportunity to learn how living systems work." The new knowledge often expands our understanding of human physiology. Since animal testing does not seem to be going anywhere, we depend on the law to support these animals. We depend on them for the advancement of our species. So where does the Animal Welfare Act fall short? In paragraph 2143A3, Congress states that animal pain and distress are to be minimized. It goes on to state that the principal investigator should consider alternatives to any procedure likely to produce pain or distress in an experimental animal. These statements are ambiguous, to say the least. It fails to state what alternatives can be used and does not define what it means to conduct alternatives. In particular, it says consider alternatives. To have this act be effective, the USDA would need to define the ambiguities. This law holds some standing, but it can be easily manipulated. A particular statement that is often manipulated concerns animal comfort and administering pain management drugs. The Act states that causing pain or distress to an animal is permissible but requires strong justification. This simply states that there is no zero-tolerance policy for pain. A researcher can put in writing why the pain is justified or valuable for scientific experimentation, and why the animal should be left untreated. An example of this is when they are researching drugs or painkillers for arthritis patients. Along with defining ambiguities, the USDA would need to increase enforcement of this act. It is becoming increasingly more difficult to enforce because of the lack of detail in the act. These animals are undergoing immense pain, surgery, mutilation for the advancement of science in medicine and in veterinary advances. They suffer so that we can be healthy, happy, and live fulfilling lives. So humanity can have treatment for everything from arthritis to cancer. Shouldn't they be treated with respect and dignity that they deserve? Without them, where would we be? We need to hold these companies accountable for their actions. I wish to conclude my speech with an example of a high-respected lab violating the Animal Welfare Act and how this law was enforced. Violating the Animal Welfare Act is very costly. If there is a violation in treatment, if there is not proper paperwork, and if there is not proper registration, there is a hefty fine. In 2013, Harvard's New England Primate Research Center was fined $24,000 for the inhumane treatment of their primate subjects. An anesthesiologist mistakenly euthanized a primate, causing renal failure and death. There were multiple reports of subjects being left without water after the surgery and inappropriate handling of animals. This led to the resignation of the center's director, Dr. Fred Wang, and the closing of the facility. The primates were transferred to other facilities. I wish to conclude this by having you consider how the act can be amended, how we can support these animals, how making choices in our daily lives, like using animal tested products or donating or just doing research and finding out how you can support animals. I implore you that we need them for advancement of us, and we love them. All right. Thank you.